So you know how people tell you it's good to control the center in chess? Well, Bobby Fischer thought otherwise. There's a quote that I love that it's no great mind has ever existed without a touch of madness. And essentially, Bobby Fischer was the embodiment of that. This game we're about to witness is going to teach many things from start to finish. There's going to be a lot of positional motifs, and there's going to be a pure major piece endgame that is fascinating. Bonus question: who does Magnus say is the current best major piece endgame player to date? Modern chess. Now, Fischer woke up and he's like, it's a great day to be me, and I'm just going to Fianchetto everything this game. And that's essentially what he did. This is the screenshot position I want to show you guys, because he just went for a double Fianchetto. We're going to get 5 Fianchettos in this game. You might be like, that's impossible. There's only 2 bishops. Yeah, but queens can also get Fianchettoed, and Bobby Fischer is going to Fianchetto his queen as well. But let's get into the game. The players, Fischer, aka the GOAT, versus Miroslav Filip Miroslav. He was a Czech player, not Czech like checkmate, Czech like Czechoslovakia. I know to all the Westerners, it's a big, big world. And Czechoslovakia is a place in that big, big world. And that's where Miroslav was from. He was a grandmaster. This is the 10th and final game that they played amongst each other. And then Miroslav is like, I quit chess because what you just did to me shouldn't be all too legal. So I quit the game. They drew the first 7 games. Fischer proceeded to win the next 3. This game was played in España, 1960 or 70. Let's get 60? 60. Let's get into the game. Black controls the center. Fischer does not. Fischer goes for a double Fianchetto. And what are we going to get? Castles, C5. Then we get C4. Another bonus question. What is this opening called? This is now the Neo-Catalan defense declined, unless it becomes the accepted. Now, one thing I want to show you guys with this defense, if you ever want to give it a try, there's a cool way to play this system for white that goes D3, E3. Bear with me. Visualize. D3, E3, knight D2. And then it's to push the pawn to A3, to put the rook on A2, and to put the queen on A1. So the rook on the second rank provides defense. You have a battery on black's king, and you have a battery on the queen side over here with your queen and rook. It's very fascinating, and then you can expand on the queen side. Give it a try. It's fun. And it's not half too bad either. Knight C6, pawn takes. All right. Is he going to take with the pawn and open up his bishop, or is he going to take with the knight? And he took with the knight. He took with the knight. It's just what he did. Now, we get knight to C3, bishop to F6, counterclaiming the diagonal. Makes a lot of sense. He's like, Fischer can probably do good things with his bishops, so let me try to stop that. We get queen C1. Now, why did Fischer go queen C1? Why didn't he go queen C2? I know what you guys are going to say. You're going to be like, I'm a genius. He wanted a battery on A3. A battery on A3. That's why he went queen C1. People are so fascinated by batteries, maybe because it's like one of the first things you learn when you learn chess, but no, that's not why. So try again. Why did he put it on C1? The true reason is if you put it on C2, then black can play knight to B4, kicking the queen back. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to run into a tempo gainer, so that's why he went queen C1. You never want to leave this bishop hanging where there's discoveries and such in the midst. Cool, calm, and collected. Like every chess player. Pawn to B6. Every good chess player, I can say that non-sarcastically. We get takes, kind of resembling like a Tarrasch or a Tartakower rather. I meant a Tartakower. And pawn to D4, trying to isolate the D5 pawn. Where does this bishop go? Does it go to B7? Not yet. Patience. It doesn't want to stare at its pawn. It wants to create a threat and stare at another pawn of the opposite side. Bishop to A6. Attacking the pawn on E2. The pawn is pinned. If it's moved, white loses the rook. So Fischer saw that. He's like, I'm going to unpin my rook, save my pawn, save my rook. Good stuff. And we get takes. And what should black take back with? Well, is it an open or a closed board? It's an open board. So if it's an open board, you want to retain the bishop pair. That's your advantage as black. So that's why he does not take with the bishop, where we would get something like this. I can put it on the board. Take. Queen A3, tempo gainer, and boom, bam. Pretty good for white, right? You know, the crazy thing is you look at this position, you're like, who's up a pawn? And you're like, quick math, black's up a pawn. And you're like, but who's actually up a pawn? And you're like, what do you mean actually? That's why we love dimensions. Chess is an abstract game. So actually, white's up a pawn. Right? You look at it, you're like, black's up a pawn, obviously. But they're double isolated pawns, so you have to assume white's going to win them both. And then at the end of the day, white's going to be up a pawn. So that's the crazy thing about chess. Look ahead. Think further, faster. It's good stuff. Bishop takes, pawn takes. We get queen to A3. By the way, I think I'm going to start like a Instagram meme account for chess. I'll also put my main in there too. I don't like social media, but in today's day and age, if this is what I'm going for, this is what I got to do. So I'll post the links down below. And one day I'll start streaming when I'm in Serbia. And it'll actually work well with the times, the time difference. Be a bit nocturnal, but that's good for me and good for you guys. So bishop to B7, boom. That's a fianchetto. So we're at 3. Count it, 3 fianchettos. We got 2 fianchettos left. Rook to D1. Okay. No discovered attack. That's pretty good. Bishop to E7 and queen to A4. Now, count for the next 10 moves how many times Fischer moves his queen. And it's always the best move. We got queen E8. He's like, trade queens with me. Fischer's like, nah, just snag a pawn. But keep in mind, when black loses the dark squared pawn, yes, the material is equal now, but this bishop becomes a lot better. So the value of your piece is great because it became opened on the dark square diagonal, so the dark squared bishop becomes better. So count your blessings. You know, you lose a pawn, get a better piece. Pros and cons. Rook to C8, queen to F4, bishop to F6, all right? Right, good diagonal. Knight D4, this is exactly what you want to do. You want to blockade isolated pawns. Why do you want to blockade isolated pawns? Because then you can assemble the rest of your pieces in such a way where you're going to scoop or collect this pawn. Right? If it's not blockaded and you assemble your pieces to scoop the pawn, then you're going to waste like 5 moves. They're going to push the pawn and you're going to be discombobulated. You're going to need a reset and it just takes too much time. So freeze isolated pawns. Bishop to E5. We get queen E3. All right. Pawn to G6. Look at that. We're going to get 4 fianchettos. You might be like, 4 is the max amount of fianchettos. You said there's 5. You're capping. I'm not capping. I'm not doing nothing. There's 5. You can fianchetto a queen as well. Mind you. Mind you. I've seen fianchettoed rooks before, but those aren't all. Fischer blundered a knight in one move. Fischer blundered a knight in one move? No, he didn't. This is like the Nezhmadinov game or Nej game. I said it wrong. I am sorry. But this is like that game where he went knight G4 and it was essentially like a clearance or deflection. Sorry, deflection. So this is the same thing. It's a deflection. Now black doesn't have the bishop pair. And it's the same colored bishop. Very important. Same colored bishop endgame. So the isolated pawn matters that much more. You might be like, stop talking about an isolated pawn. It's just an isolated pawn. Well, no. For them, for us, it's just an isolated pawn. But an isolated pawn at that level is like a 1600 being down like a knight. And it's like a 1200 being down a rook. And it's like a 800 below being down a queen. That's how much this type of stuff matters. Boom! 5th fianchetto. What'd I say? Huh? There's 5. Count them. And then we're going to get into a beautiful major piece endgame. So rook c5, pawn h4. Right? Fischer was stockfish before stockfish. So he just knew flank pawns, they got to go. When the position has been dealt with, flank pawns are a big thorn. They actually go up the board quite fast. You know, I don't think people realize how quickly pawns move up the board. 1, 2, 3, you have a checkmating threat. You have a checkmating threat and you're 2 away from promoting. I mean, it's a reach, but that's how fast, like, use your pass pawn, not pass pawns, use your pawns, use your flank pawns. We get rook to d2. All right, the stock of fish doesn't love it. It just wants you to go h5 and play this sort of thing going for this. Of course, there's defenses for black, but that's what it wanted. But we got rook to d2. We got rook to d2. It's what we got. Rook to c3, rook to d1. And again, it kind of just wants you to push the flank pawn, but I think doubling up on the isolated pawn makes a lot of sense. Queen c5, we got a tripled up bat array on the c file and pawn to b4. So it really wanted Fischer to scoop this pawn. Why do you think he didn't? I feel like he felt if he lets the position marinate, right? If you let it simmer, because chess players, they all crack eventually. We all know that. You can't play perfect forever. Everybody. It's about who cracks last. That's chess. So I think he didn't want to cash out too early, right? We would reach this position, and then we would get rook to c1. You might be like, you just blundered. I'd be like, no, I didn't. I didn't just blunder. You might be like, you hung your queen, but no, because 2 rooks is better than a queen. So 2 rooks versus a queen and a pawn. You coordinate the rooks. You make sure everything defends everything. You disallow them from going to h6 to mate you. It's a fortress. It's an unbreakable fortress unless you disconnect your rooks. But yeah, the 2 rooks far outshine that of the queen. You might be like, well, that wasn't forced. What about a check? That's a fair statement, right? Takes. But then what do? You can't take back because it's pinned. Stick with me. You take here. And then it's just a rook and a queen versus a rook and a queen. Yes, you are up a pawn. It is not a pass pawn. It's not a pass pawn. That's not a pass pawn. But it's a pawn. It's an extra pawn for sure. And so we don't get that just yet. He doesn't want to cash out, rather, just yet. So we got pawn to b4, hitting the queen, targeting the queen, forcing it to move, and pawn to e3. Just making a nice, safe structure. Pawn h5, beautiful move, blockading the flank. Pawn to a3, all right, guarding the b4 pawn makes a lot of sense. King h7, and finally he snags the pawn. And here is our major piece endgame. The answer, by the way, Nepo. Best major piece endgame player at the modern day, according to Magnesium Calcium. So don't quote me, quote that guy. He's pretty good at chess. He's like the best at chess. We got queen to e4, all right, is Fischer getting mated? Not quite. Is Miroslav getting mated? Maybe. Now, this is pretty crazy because you might be like, well, like, white's going to lose. Well, but then white wins. If you move that rook, white wins. So this rook is officially pinned. We got queen to f3. And look at this savagery. Look at the cool, calm, collected king h2. I mean, who does that? But essentially, it's to avoid any check, any tempo gains that might be unfortunate in the future. This queen x-rays over to f2, not x-rays, but it guards f2. And this rook, why is white not getting checkmated? Well, white's not getting checkmated because black's getting checkmate. That's like saying, why didn't you lose? I didn't lose because I won. Why didn't you win? I didn't win because I lost, you know? It's just one move too fast. One move too fast sometimes. So we get rook to c4, rook to d7, and yeah, Fischer's pieces are just the Fianchetto. The Fianchetto really did it to him. Pawn to g5. Everybody cracks under pressure. His time was now. We get g5 trying to blow open everything. But we got rook f8, and you're just winning the queen. It just looks like you're winning the queen. You might be like, well, no, I'll just go here. You could even take that because this rook is pinned. But you can also take this and just win the queen. And then you might be like, but I thought you said 2 rooks is better than a queen. Well, there's also a rook on c3 that's getting taken. So that wouldn't quite work. So we get king g6, but then check, and g5 gets scooped. And that's essentially the end of the game. He doubles up on h5. Black guards that. We get rook to f5, and black resigns because there is just no way to stop checkmate. So, yeah, black is close to checkmate, but close is not checkmate. So, a beautiful game by Fischer. He was really good at deploying b3. It's funny because he was like an exclusive e4 player, but when he played b3, when he played c4, when he played the kings, he just never lost. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the game as much as I did. Thank you as always for watching. Have a great day. Peace.